I'm Tony Hickey. I'm an Irishman by origin. I have a tour company, Ethiopian Quadrants, which was founded in 2006. But prior to that, I've been engaged in tourism. I started just at the very end of the imperial period before the coming of the Derg. I drove up and down through Ethiopia several times, 73, 74. I left in 75, but after the fall of the Derg, I came back to Ethiopia and I've been engaged in tourism ever since. Tourism is the poor relative in the family when it comes to economic sectors. Because although successive administrations have said yes, tourism is important, generally it's kind of just lip service. It gets sidelined. Tourism is enormously important in terms of jobs. It's the biggest employer in the world. It's the biggest economic sector in the world in terms of employment. And although we don't have statistics in it, we don't have, I could say, definite statistics in Ethiopia, there still must be huge numbers of people employed. Now, when it comes to birds, two now have very successful bird watching companies, and two others went on to form another company. But let's say with birds, it's a massive sector, and it's quite unrecognized, I would say, really in Ethiopia, because I'm sure, and I hope somebody could prove me wrong, but if you went to the Ministry of Culture and Tourism or Ethiopian Tourism Organization, Tourism Dirigit, however it's called now, I'm sure you won't find an ornithologist or someone who is very expert in birds. So it's been left to the private sector to develop bird watching in Ethiopia. And just to give you some idea, like in Britain, I mean, they're very keen bird watchers in Britain. The Society for the Protection of Birds has more members than all the political parties combined. In America, 1/5 of the population, we're talking about 60+ million people, identify themselves as bird lovers or interested in birds. So there's a gigantic market out there. Even now, people, may be surprised, although I'm not surprised, but Chinese tourists are coming to Ethiopia to see birds. Tourism, when people talk about tourism, we talk about the historic route, the culture, and so on, and all these are very important sectors. But I would say probably 25 to 30% of my business is bird watching. And the thing about bird watchers, they are excellent publicists. Because if a bird watcher comes on a tour, they post it on the internet. They post everything they've seen and the photos on the internet. So bird watchers around the world, and they're all terribly keen, they will look at this trip report. The guy went to the Awash, where there's more than 400 bird species. Then they go down the Rift Valley lakes with the photos, beautiful photos of the lakes, birds. They go to the Bali Mountains, where also the birders will show endemic mammals like the simian wolf, Menelik's bushbuck, mountain Nyala. So birders around the world see these trip reports. This is far more than any efforts we can do. Let alone our company, even the ministry and the tourism dirigate cannot reach this huge audience which simple bird watching clients reach through their trip reports. So, we get, after someone will email me and say, I want to do the trip you organized 10 years ago for so-and-so. I've just seen it on the internet. Birders also, they're good tourists. They're not coming to take artifacts or engage in sex tourism or something. They're very concerned. They're concerned about the environment. We should be engaging them in many, many ways. People have said to me, why don't you start awareness programs in schools about the importance of birds? Because birds, they're like indicators of what's going right and what's going wrong in our environment. If birds start disappearing, we know we're in trouble. But you see, around the country, I mean, Ethiopia has more than 800 species. So people love to come here. And also, what birders tell me, Ethiopian birds are they're not scared. Ethiopians don't eat birds. I think in other countries, maybe they catch them and eat them or shoot them. But here, people have said you can get very, very close to birds, you know, so they always love, I mean, when the birders come to Ethiopia, apart from problems they may face, poor accommodation, one company last year said we had 17 days and only 2 hot showers. So, you know, there's infrastructural problems, there's hotel problems, even in the big sites, you know. You go down to the Bali Mountains, Goba Wabe Shebele, it really needs uplift. People always complain, the water not working and so on, but there's no other hotel in town. But there are other places, bird watchers know that if you drive through Bali and you go down to Borana, there are certain species that you don't see anywhere else. And you know, there's famous birds like this Prince Raspoli's Turako, which has a big kind of hat. And there's other very rare species as you go further down, but the accommodation is virtually non-existent or poor. So if we really want to be serious about jobs and tourism, we have to look at these hotspots, birding hotspots. And, you know, what's missing? I mean, birders don't need luxury accommodation, luxury lodges, but they would expect, you know, running water, clean toilets, hot showers, food, and it's not very difficult to organize, you know. Regional governments could engage investors, for example, in Borana, around you know, Negele Borana, and say, look, let's try to improve the standard of the hotel. What do you need? You know, maybe we can, if there are local business people there, they can be engaged and asked, okay, look, to upgrade your hotel, so there's constant hot water, what do you need? For food, what do tourists eat? They're not asking again for very luxurious, you know, complicated meals. It can be pasta. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of them, they enjoy Ethiopian national dishes as well. But you know, currently the situation in Negele Borana is poor for tourists. Mm-hmm. And there are other places where there are no hotels at all. Gemma Valley, people are going to the Gemma Valley to see a rare endemic bird called Harwood's francolin, you know. There's no accommodation there, so they drive on to Debar Burhan. Okay. So, you know, you could engage local people. I mean, tourism does have a huge capacity or ability to create jobs because it's service oriented. Like in a hotel, there are so many people. You need chambermaids, you need laundry, you need cooks, cleaners. So for school leavers, it's good. I mean, in my country of origin, Ireland, I brought some years back, 10 years ago, Irish tourism business people. And they explained to the ministry, Ireland, I think it has one UNESCO World Heritage Site, has 9 million tourists a year, which is double the population of the country. I mean, the population of Ireland is like Addis, 4.5 million. Mm-hmm. How do we do it, they said. We started, you know, I mean, in 1960, the tourism income in Ireland was £3 million. Mm-hmm. Nothing, like, you know, $5 million. Now it's so many, I don't know, 10 billion per year, it's gigantic. And the government made a very concentrated and determined effort to train people in the service sector. You know, in hotels, bars, restaurants, and all of this kind of thing, so they can provide very good service. Tourists often complain, they say Ethiopians are very nice and very friendly, but they're untrained. Mm-hmm. So you'll go into a restaurant, you may wait 40 minutes to be served, you know? And if you're on a tour, especially if you're a bird watcher, because you want to be out all the time hunting, 40 minutes waiting for your soup, they say, you know, why? And it is a matter of training and supervision. So many other countries in Africa have addressed and solve this problem.
Okay.
And so we are lagging behind, I'm sorry to say.
All right.
But tourists are still coming. Birders are always coming. And the interesting thing, I remember it's about 20 years ago, there was a security problem near the border with Somalia, Bogol Manyo, this Al-Jamia Al-Islamiyah. There was some problem down there, they had a camp. But the birders, they don't get put off.
Yeah.
There's a bird, they want to see it, the Sidama lark, they have to go down there and see it. I mean, so they will even minimize that risk of terrorism to reach their objective. So they're hardy, birders are harder, they don't need luxury, even they're not scared by security issues. But we should be looking, how do we, in providing them the accommodation, food and stuff they need, how do we provide jobs to local people? The parks and wildlife reserves in Ethiopia are enormously valuable assets for the country. And they can generate far more money as parks and reserves than they can in terms of subsistence agriculture. So, companies or bird guides that I know, they say, well, certain species, you don't see them anymore, that you used to find in Awash. They say you no longer see them. And this is because maybe land inappropriately has been cleared for certain agriculture. Maybe there's pesticides being used. In terms of mammals, people going into the Bali Mountain Park with dogs, they've introduced rabies, which have almost threatened to wipe out the population of simian wolf. So, what I said before is about birds are very good indicators. When they start disappearing, you know something's going seriously wrong. Vultures have a role to play. Every bird has a role to play, in terms of the environment. Vultures clean up things, they clear up stuff. When certain species start disappearing, really it's a loss. It's a huge loss, not only to Ethiopia, but to humanity as a whole. So every effort must be made, provide more resources to parks, pay better, pay park wardens better fees, train them, there are a lot of training programs available. Charge more for park entrance, and instead of that money going to the center, put it into the parks, whether in terms of salaries for wardens, training programs and so on. But this, once the parks and this are gone, there's no bringing it back. Despite certain complaints, I would say 90–95% of the birders who come have a great time. That's one. So, these are small and they're not unsolvable issues. For Ethiopian young people watching, learn about birds, I know people that through reading the books and accompanying bird groups, they have now got very good jobs for themselves, as bird guides. A bird guide will get very highly paid, much more in a way than a guide to the historic route, because they're rare. We're not doing enough in terms of training. But to anyone watching the program, start looking at the birds in your garden. They're beautiful. And as I said, birds will tell you what's going right and wrong in the environment. They're very good indicators. We should look after them, we should care for them, and we should preserve those environments which they need to flourish.